Hey everybody, welcome to my first episode on pixel art. I'm really excited to finally have this in front of you, and I really hope that you're going to enjoy it and actually learn something from it. I hope it's also going to be interesting just going through some of the little stories that are associated with it, so really great to be doing this at last. My history of pixel art is something that goes back many years, and started probably with my Commodore 64, which came with a very basic paint package on it. I can't remember the name of it now, unfortunately, but it wasn't koala paint, which is a well-known example of it. But really properly it started with the Amiga, which often came with a fantastic paint package called Deluxe Paint. This is one that originally came with my Amiga 500 Plus, and also with the Amiga 600. I think this actually was the one that came with the Amiga 600 that I've shown previously in this channel. So Deluxe Paint, I spent absolutely hours in this package when I was younger, creating animations and drawing little characters and just generally having lots of fun with it. So in the pre-Photoshop days, this was where it was at. I'm sure some of you may have also used packages like Microsoft Paintbrush or Mac Paint if you had a Macintosh, instead of Deluxe Paint if you didn't have the Amiga. But this really was where it was at. And this is what I learned to cut my teeth on. So this series is going to look at how to create pixel art in the modern day using modern tools and things that are actually going to make it easier for you. But we're also going to use retro systems like the Amiga to actually finish off artwork. And actually, as time goes on, I'm going to show you how to create completely original artwork using nothing more than an old Amiga and a mouse. But today we're going to start off with some fairly modern tools and then bring it back onto the Amiga. So pixel art is something that's been really close to my heart for so many years. In fact, most of my favourite games involve pixel art in some of the ways. One of my favourite games of all time, mentioned this already, Rainbow Islands. This is an absolute classic. I remember playing this for the first time on a friend's Amiga 500, and I was just like, I have to get this game, and lo and behold, eventually I did. So I've spent hours in this game. The characters, you know, sort of, is it Bub or Bob? I can't remember which one it is in this particular game. But anyway, either Bub or Bob. The colour, the graphics, it just really spoke to me. So it's really from that it started. But even some of my favourite games, you know, which are a little bit more recent, albeit that they're getting on for 20 years old now. Grandia. I mean, one reason I love Grandia 2, it's a fantastic game. But the reason why I love Grandia, apart from its amazing storyline and so forth, is little pixel art, the little sprite characters. They're just so adorable. And of course, throughout the game, you've got wonderful little 2D representations of them when they're sort of going through their dialogue. So yeah, Grandia is a fantastic example of pixel art in a, I say modern game, but I guess it probably isn't really anymore. And Luna. Now, I've only actually got Silver Star Story Complete. This is just amazing as a game, but the actual artwork and the characters, wow, they're so good. They're just so full of little character and emotions, and I just love the cuteness of it. I know it's not very cool, is it? Cute? I created a little character on, which I may show you later on Deluxe Paint earlier this week, called a Tickle Pickle. So I think that says all you need to know about me. The other really cool thing about doing this channel is that I'm able to actually show you some of the things that I've been getting back into. Pixel art is one of them. I've not actually done really any pixel art now for about 20 years. Until I picked it up again this winter just gone. So it's really cool actually to be able to share these passions with you, and actually hopefully you're going to learn something from it. I've also been really getting back into my drawing manga. Manga was something that I used to draw quite a lot of when I was in sort of my teens, mid-teens, early 20s mostly. But that is getting on for about 15 years ago now, so it's been really nice actually to spend some time in the winter months actually just sort of creating little manga characters and so forth. And I really recommend Mark Crilly's Mastering Manga books. I picked up the first one a little while ago, and his YouTube channel is highly recommended. But for anybody just starting out who wants to learn how to draw a manga, or perhaps for somebody like myself who, you know, is brushing up on their skills and, you know, really sort of hoping to sort of spend a bit more time doing it, you know, this is a really recommended book, and I've been enjoying sort of creating some little drawings. Just did a little chibi character earlier on today, so I just love the cuteness. Like I say, tickle pickles. I know, I'm very, very whimsical. So what's the end goal with this? Well, one, I really hope that you learn how to do something that is a bit beyond just sort of like the squiggles that you may have created all those years ago. But also, for myself, I'm looking to create a JRPG for the Amiga, of which there are arguably, well, there's one, there's Sparrow's Legacy, and I think there's another, which the name slips my mind, but Sparrow's Legacy, while it was a good attempt at the mechanics of creating a JRPG for the Amiga, but really it was a Zelda Link to the Past clone, so is it an RPG? I'm not even going to get into that, but that was the closest that we got in the Amiga, probably because the Amiga found most of its success in Europe and Australia and New Zealand, rather than, certainly it wasn't a success in Japan, and it certainly wasn't much of a success in the United States or Canada. So, and I think it was that very Western-centric influence that meant that the Amiga never really saw any JRPGs, and ultimately why I found more interest in perhaps playing games on the Super Nintendo in sort of like come the mid-90s and so forth. So for me, you know, doing pixel art is doing graphics for this JRPG that I'm going to create for the Amiga, but also just something that's a bit of fun. And I think that's actually, I'm going to keep on underlining this in my videos. This is all about fun, guys. This is all about me having a bit of downtime, you know, doing things that I used to do years ago and not feeling pressure that I'm going to do it this way, you know, to sort of create some amazing end results. I'm learning as I go along with this as well, so I really hope that you're going to learn something from this. Today we're going to start gently. We're not going to look at creating game characters just yet, I know. Today we're going to look at trees. Yeah, exciting, huh? But actually trees are a really great way to start because they're quite simple, or they can actually be quite beautiful in the way that we create them. But also they allow us to apply sort of basic principles which you would use in any art form, such as, you know, light sources, tones. We can create little cool tricks where we can give the impression of, through a bit of colour cycling, that the leaves are just gently rustling in the breeze and so forth. So trees are a great way to start. We can also look at how we don't necessarily have to look at reality for the ultimate representation of things in pixel art. We can use our imaginations, we can use colour in ways that you wouldn't get in real life. So, you know, why not have purple tree trunks and, you know, sort of completely yellow foliage and so forth. So yes, this is going to be really good fun to go through. Really excited about sharing this with you, so I hope you enjoy. So what it remains for me to say is see you soon. Bye. So where do we begin with pixel art? I'm not afraid to use modern tools to create artwork, and neither should you be. Whilst in the Amiga days we did have graphics tablets such as a Tabby, these days picking up a decent quality graphics tablet isn't an overly expensive investment. I bought my first graphics tablet in 2005, a Wacom Intuos 3, and it set me back over £200, even with my staff discount at the Apple store that I used to work at back then. These days, it is easy to pick up a good tablet like the Gaumon M106K for around £60, which will not only be perfectly good for pixel art, it'll also be excellent in Photoshop, Lightroom, Sketchbook and other art applications. If you're intent on using the Amiga via emulation for drawing from scratch, I have some bad news. A graphics tablet like the Gaumon or a Wacom will work in UAE as a mouse, but it'll be pretty unusable for drawing. So you'll be restricted to an actual mouse, which for pixel art is just fine. I'm pretty sure some of the greats back in the days wore out a few Amiga tank mice. I often prefer to start my pixel art on the Mac these days and then bring it into the Amiga for finishing, as this speeds up the process. There's nothing in this video that you won't be able to accomplish with a mouse and Deluxe Paint alone though. Your imagination and practice is going to be your most important tool. In later episodes I'll be showing you how to create pixel art from scratch on an Amiga with just a mouse and Deluxe Paint alone. So let's dive in and start talking about colour and palettes. For the last 20 years or so, most of us have been spoiled with true colour displays, allowing 16 million colours at our disposal, and even transparency. Those of us who grew up with computers that can only display a few colours understand this, but some younger viewers may have only ever used a system capable of showing photorealistic true colour. When we go back to our retro consoles and computers with a restricted number of colours, some of the console or computers can only display preset colours with no way of actually changing them, such as the Commodore 64 or the Nintendo Entertainment System. It can seem impossible to create beautiful graphics with such a confined palette. But you only have to look at some of the games we may fondly remember, or at least admire, and sometimes it seems like an illusion that these games are only displaying 16, 32 or perhaps 64 colours on screen. It is also said that limitations can make us even more creative, and having a restricted colour palette will certainly do that. However, the topic of limitation and creativity is an episode in itself. For this tutorial, I'll be using a palette created by the awesome Mortmort. Definitely go and check out his stuff. He's super inspiring, I love his videos. I just think it's awesome seeing younger people embracing this style. Not that I am too past it myself, but I am 35 next week. The tool I use to draw a lot of pixel art on my Mac is called Aseprite. It's just so good. It's a deceptively simple package geared up for creating pixel art on your Mac or Windows PC. It's also super cheap, so it's around £10. It's just a pick up and grab item. So let's talk about some basic principles before we ink anything. Light is so important to understanding when drawing, just as the same as it is essential to any graphic art form. You could spend a lifetime studying light and still only scratch the surface. The great thing about pixel art is that its complexities can be easily understood. The first property is the direction of light. If you're going to create dimension in your pixel art, you need to figure out where the sun or the light source is coming from. It is from the left or is it from the right, from the front, etc. Then apply it consistently to the scene. Doing this will give your artwork dimension and make it eye-catching. The second property is the warmth of the light source. If we just look at the sun as our source of light for the moment, you'll find that first thing in the morning and during the evenings when the sunlight is at its most warm and golden. Photographers often refer to this as a golden hour. However, during the middle of the day, the sunlight is much less warm. In fact, it can be quite blue if you look in the shadows. With a restricted colour palette, it can be hard to emulate all of this, but it can inform the colours that we use when we create objects. With pixel art, this can tip into the surreal, and there's no reason not to embrace this, and perhaps my love of pixel art lays in the games that I grew up playing representing fantastical realms of rainbows being used to snuff out little bugs, or plumbers eating magic mushrooms, or kids that ran around their neighbourhood looking for the legendary armour. I'm quite heartened to see games like Child of Light, Owlboy, and perhaps even Ni no Kuni embracing something aside from dark, tempestuous palettes and realms. This means that you can let your imagination fly, and if you want to represent evening light by having pure golden trees, then why not? It's been done before in games like Terranigma, and they're brilliant. Another cool trick with pixel art is that we can flip the images on a horizontal axis to change the source of light, which is something you may wish to consider when creating maps for games, as an efficient way to use storage space. Don't forget the original Super Mario on the NES was only 32 kilobytes. That's smaller than probably the JavaScript source of this YouTube page. That is all I'm going to say about light for now. Just remember the light will illuminate a certain part of your art to give the impression of dimension. This isn't always necessary, of course, it's just my preference. Here's an example of a cherry blossom tree that I drew. Here you can see that it appears the sunlight is shining on the right hand side of the tree. It appears the left side is also in shade. This gives the image a little more depth than having applied the highlights to both sides of the tree. So let's get started with perhaps a fairly easy tree to draw, a weeping willow. I've chosen this as an example because if you look at a weeping willow tree, its foliage droops in almost straight drop and it's quite defined in shape. This is going to be in a time lapse in parts because otherwise you'll have 45 minutes of video to watch, but I'll slow it down where there is a technique that I want to pass on. First, unless you have a very clear picture in your head, don't be afraid to have something to inspire you, such as a photo which will help you draw your image. There is no harm in this at all. So I have a photo here of a weeping willow which will help inspire me as I'm drawing. I first create a 64 by 64 pixel canvas. As part of this tile map, this would take 16 tiles to render, if each tile was 16 by 16 pixels in size. This would be 4 tiles across and 4 down. We use multiples of 16 because 16-bit computers like the SNES, Mega Drive or Amiga can work faster with multiples of 16. This is quite a bit, but if you look at games such as Secret of Mana or Chrono Trigger, sections of those games are usually delineated by a clear style, such as being an ice zone or a verdant forest zone. I mean, you don't need to have a very large source set of tiles, as you can load those on the fly as the player moves from one zone to another. Secret of Mana is actually a great example of this delineation. There are also some other tricks where we can manipulate the palette, which we'll look at in another episode. I always start trees with a trunk and branches. Using Aseprite means I can create this as a layer which will sit behind the foliage. This is the beauty of Aseprite, is that you have layers at your disposal which you don't really have when using something like Deluxe Paint. It goes without saying that the main trunk is thicker at the bottom and the branches are higher up in the tree. Also, if you look at the tree, you'll find on the whole the branches branch out in an upward sweep. There are exceptions, such as a gnarly old oak tree tends to be a bit crooked. But if you look for inspiration in a photo and observe the tree structure, you will understand this. You don't have to make this perfect, as it will be mostly hidden by the foliage, but it will act as a structure for your foliage. In fact, better than looking at a photo of a tree, go outside and look at a tree with your eyes. Being outdoors for me is essential to feeding my creativity. Once the structure of the trunk is done, I create a layer for what will be the shadow foliage. This is essentially the leaves that are underneath those closest to the surface, and will eventually be covered by lighter shades of green to symbolise the foliage at the surface of the tree. I use the spray gun tool here, but not randomly. I've restricted its spread to only a few pixels and genuinely drag it down vertically to symbolise the hanging foliage. Key here is not treating a pixel art as something that doesn't need a bit of care or technique because it's not a painting or sketch. You'll also notice that I curved the top of the drooping foliage, as this mimics the waterfall-like structure that is so distinctively like a weeping willow. At this stage, you'll notice I'm layering more light shades of green on the right hand side, as this is going to be the side of the tree that the light is shining on. And then switch away from the spray gun tool and use a simple pixel wide brush and start painting down clean vertical strokes. You can begin to see how this is coming together now. I'm always relieved when I get to this stage. I never really know for sure when I start whether what I draw is going to be great. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Don't be discouraged by this. It's so important to try and make mistakes with anything that you do in life. To become good at something, everything is an iterative process and you should enjoy the journey. Anyway, now I'm layering some brighter tones, almost yellow shades on the right side of the tree to symbolise where the sun is shining. I do introduce a little of this to the left side of the tree, as light does wrap around the middle of the tree, of course. Sometimes you'll only know if something is working as you build up the tile map for your game zone, but all these graphics can be tweaked even at that stage. I also adjust the zones of the tree to move blocks of the major foliage around and create some gaps, and then just patch up these gaps as appropriate. You'll also notice at the bottom of the drooping foliage, I gradually lighten the foliage to brighter tones. It's not essential, but I think it's a nice touch. You'll also notice I have the odd pixel at the bottom of the tree that has a transparent gap between them. This is just a stylistic choice of mine. I like it, but you don't have to. So why save as a GIF? Well, for some reason, even though Photoshop can save as an IF-ILBM, which is the de facto Amiga native image format, the files don't seem to open reliably on my Amiga anymore. So I save as a GIF, and then using Multiview or a similar tool, I can save as an IF-ILBM. If you're using an Amiga to follow this, to convert a GIF depends on your operating system. If you're on an Amiga with Workbench 1.3 or older, I'm afraid I don't know any applications, but on my real Amiga 600 which runs Amiga Workbench 2, I use the staple from the old days called ViewTech to convert GIFs to IFs. But if you have Workbench 3, simply install a GIF data type and Multiview will display the file and allow you to save as an IF, which is what I'm doing here. I also use Deluxe Paint. I know DPaint 4 has some improvements, but DPaint 3 is plenty good enough for my older Amigas. So now to finish this on the Amiga. Unfortunately my capture card hasn't been working for a little while, so this is on UAE, an Amiga emulator. In this I'm going to use extra half bright mode. Because I plan to create a game that will work on the Workbench 1.3 Amiga 500, I'm sticking to the number of colours that an original chipset Amiga can display. Not only that, but DPaint 3 doesn't support AGA 256 colour modes, but then neither does the Amiga 500 or my Amiga 600. You will notice I always use a magnifying tool here. When you start using this, you may find it all a bit of a pixelated mess, but with more practice you'll get used to this and be able to see the wood from the trees. But jokes aside, if you try doing this without the magnifier, you'll lack accuracy, as I'm now using the mouse as well. Once this is finished, I create a couple of basic rectangles to see how the tree looks on a pure white background to show up any obvious flaws, and a green background to simulate a grassy landscape. You can really see on a white backdrop now how the light sourcing comes into play. The pixel art Weeping Willow just leaps off the screen and it looks beautiful, even if I do say so myself. So now I just want to save this, and here you'll see some of my other recent creations tree-wise. You can see how Mort's soft milk palette really does look so gorgeous. It's quite pastel in a way. So that is how to do a bit of pixel art. I hope it's been helpful. Now let's do a little trick. I'm going to take that Weeping Willow tree and create a little program in Blitz Basic. I won't explain all the code in this episode, but here's the key trick. We're going to use a little palette cycling to simulate light dancing off the leaves. This code tells the colour registers to change colour during different parts of the screen refresh cycle. The trick is to do it quite subtly. This is a very basic program, and we could use a bit more logic to get an impression of randomness of light shimmering off in the foliage, but for now this is a good demonstration. I really hope you've enjoyed this introduction to pixel art. It's introduced a lot of new concepts, I'm sure, which I hope you'll find helpful and encourage you to also pick up your mouse or tablet and just create something. Just remember, have fun with it after all. You need to be playful to have an open heart to create the next grand year. So I guess all that remains for me to say is, see you soon. Bye.